for Joseph Baba Ifa. Baba knows the way, we follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients, he honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.
Hey family, thank you for tuning in to Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa. We're only the strongest roots, see the light, brought to you by Botánica candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, hit that subscribe button. So today we are coming at you with part 2 of the Iyawo Rules video. First one got a great response. A bunch of people were really appreciative of it, being that they're going through the process as we speak. And there's always something to learn about it for sure, to make sure that we're doing it to the best of our abilities. So in this video, we're going to be focusing a lot on the do's and don'ts as compared to the last one, which was a little more theoretical. A lot of the rules, if not all of the rules, ultimately are in the Odus of Eafung. Now, some of you may remember that Odu because it was the video, or it's the Odu that the 16 commandments of Ifa are found in, and is actually one of the most successful videos on the channel. So I highly recommend it. But ironically, apart from those 16 commandments of Ifa in general, are also the rules for the Iyaworaje. So it's really a two-part pataki within the Odus of Eafung. And what occurred is in this Odu, it speaks of 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲. And 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 had received the money to initiate one of his godchildren into Orisha. But to be able to do so, he chose not to incorporate any other Orishas, specifically 𝘄cie, right? So when he took them through the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 or Orisha process, he went with his godchild to visit the person's godfather in Ifa, who in this case was Orunmila. So when Orunmila looked at whether he was actually present at the initiation, or in modern times where there was a book and he was able to overlook the information, he quickly realized that 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 had cut quite a few corners. Now, when 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 was questioned about this, he really didn't want to talk about it, but Orunmila knew he was trying to save money and pocket it for himself, which unfortunately happens quite frequently in this community. And, you know, Orunmila was a little bit irate. And he looked at 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 and he said, you know, you did Orisha to this person, but now look at all of the debts that they have. You know, in some versions of the story, he even had to repeat the Orisha process because so much was missing, it couldn't be called a legitimate Orisha. So, obviously, 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 was perturbed by this, and they had to do it all over again, or at that point, the person had to fulfill with the other Orishas another way. Now, to interpret this part specifically, there's a couple different ways to initiate into Orisha. Within the Lukumi context, you have something known as the lavado. And the lavado of Orisha, or the washing of Orisha, makes reference to receiving Orishas without crowning them, specifically the person's Orisha alabatori, or head Orisha, identified ideally in the hand of Ifa process. So let's say you have somebody that wants to initiate as a babalawo, but they're not really interested in practicing Orisha on a formal priesthood level, which some might not, or some might not need to. Basically, you incorporate the guardian Orisha and, of course, 𝘄cie, or 𝗃𝗏𝗏, to be able to manifest through that process. For the ones in our house that have washed, I also recommend receiving 𝗃𝗂 because he's necessary for further steps. So you have that. Then apart from that, you have the conventional Orisha Lukumi regla de ocha process, where you receive your 5 basic Orishas, apart from whichever other ones are strongly associated with the Orisha you're crowning. So for example, if you're crowning a 𝗃𝗁, you get your main 5, but you also get 𝗃𝗏𝗃 and the 𝗵𝗍𝗍, right? So that's very key because those Orishas go through the process as well. So you have that, where you receive a slew of Orishas and quite a few animals, you know, rest in peace. So, but then you have another process known as pata y cabeza, which is head and feet, right? Or in this case, feet and head, where you initiate into the guardian Orisha, and then the person also fulfills with 𝘄cie. So it's basically a lavao, but you're actually crowning it. So there's very minor adjustments based on the quantity of Orisha. So when we look at what occurred with 𝗶𝗸𝗲, with this person specifically, they basically did a pata y cabeza, right? Which is kind of how it's done in Africa till this day. But in Africa, they don't even put the pata, which makes reference to the feet, or 𝘃𝗵𝗄, where he lives. They really just focus on the Orisha, right, that you're crowning. So, for example, if you're going to initiate into 𝗶𝗸𝗲, you initiate into 𝗶𝗸𝗲, you receive 𝗶𝗸𝗲, and your reading is with 𝗶𝗸𝗲, because 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲 has his own entirely. But in Cuba, based on the Adimu system within our pata y cabeza, which still occurs to this day, especially in places like Matanzas, you receive 𝗃𝗵𝗄 as well with his conversation if you're not crowning him. If you're crowning him, you get 2 conversations with him based on the duality. But neither here nor there, 𝗶𝗸𝗲 here cut a couple corners, because he actually eliminated 𝗃𝗵𝗄 from the process altogether. And even if 𝗃𝗵𝗄 is not going to be going through the process of ita, we still got to feed him. So key points for sure. Now, this is what segues us into the next pataki. So the person that was going to initiate into Orisha didn't have a lot of funds, right? So the Orishas provided what they needed to be able to heal them or save them, right? So when they went through the Orisha process, though, when the day of Ita came, each Orisha made a restriction upon the person. So, for example, 𝗶𝗸𝗲 said, you know, I don't want to see you near the mountain, right? Because that's his space in nature. Let's say Oshun said, I don't want to see you at the river. Yemaya said, I don't want to see you at the ocean. Oya said, I don't want to see you at the marketplace or the cemetery. Shango said, I don't want to see you by the palm tree. Babaluaye took a restriction. Osang took a restriction. All of the Orishas made a restriction upon the Yahw based on their debts, right? But the only one, even though he said, I don't want to see you at the 4 corners too much, that didn't have something too strict for them was 𝗃𝗵𝗄. Because 𝗃𝗵𝗄 said, you can get through this process without everybody but me. You need to break me off, because the reason I need that goat is because I need enough energy to make it from heaven to earth, and no one here is going to give me a ride. So 𝗃𝗵𝗄 is the one guy, regardless of whether we have the money or not, we need to come up with it, because he doesn't do anything for free. So this is where the restrictions of the Iyaworaje come from. Why the Iyawo is really delegated to their home. Now, this may be one of the most difficult processes within all of Ifa and Orisha. This year in white, known as the Iyaworaje, is a very difficult one, especially when people are first coming into the religion, or they're used to leading an active lifestyle, or, you know, they just don't have that support system other than their elders. So, but this is where it comes from, because a lot of people say, well, how come the Yahw can't do this, or why this? That's what we're trying to explain today, and that's all in the Odus of Eafung. And it was the Orishas themselves who did this as a way to restrict and ultimately protect the Yahw from the energies that live at any of these given spaces. You know, semi-recently we came out with a video talking about why the uninitiated can't stimulate certain spaces of nature from an Orisha standpoint if they don't at least have their hand of Ifa. Because the thing is those spaces of nature don't recognize them, neither do the Orishas, being that the Orishas recognize the person via Orumila's revelation in the hand of Ifa. Or when they go to that space in nature at the moment, they might invoke an Orisha, but they might find a negative energy altogether. So the point, once again, is if the Yahw, who's an initiate of priesthood of Orisha, is not able to go, how can anyone that's uninitiated think they have that posterity? Neither here nor there. But this is why the Yahw can't go to certain spaces without putting themselves in danger. You know, I recall specifically one time I actually went to Sedano's. I think I mentioned this in the last video, where, you know, I actually had forgotten my umbrella in the car because I was running around, and I was in Sedano's. It was a perfectly sunny day when I came in, and when I came out, it was raining torrentially. I don't know. It was really coincidental, I would say. But ironically, there was actually a woman there that had Orisha crown, being that Sedano's is a bastion of Orisha and, Cuban people and Caribbean life. She said, Yahw, está lloviendo, get ready. Like she was saying, you're going to be stuck there for a while. Because ironically, my godmother worked in the Sitanos as well. So I had to bite the bullet there and sit down. But why, right? So the reason the Yahw should not be getting wet with rainwater is in the Odus of Eafung Pt.2 or 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏. And in that sign was where 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 actually went to war with rain, right? Because the rain would attack him and affect his skin and take away his Ashe. It's actually the Odus of the umbrella. A lot of people are like, well, why do we use an umbrella? From a rain standpoint, that's also in the Odus of Eafung Pt.2, where 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 wanted to confection a tool to be able to defend himself from his enemy. And with the umbrella, we've been saving Ori for, hundreds of years, right? Other than just staying under a shedded space. But that's a reason why the Yahw uses it. And apart from that, why the rainwater sometimes is seen as detrimental. Always in the Iyaworaje, but there's other people that rainwater does them well. There's other people that do not. Another thing to analyze is the Yahw should not run. In the Odus of Eafung was where the Iyawo, not the Iyawo, forgive me, where 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 and all the Orishas were coming down from heaven. And 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 had done divination and 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏 for 𝗃𝗶𝗏𝗏 before leaving heaven, where Ifa told him to never run. And when all the Orishas descended, it was actually raining at the moment. They came down. Some people say the Orishas actually traveled from heaven to earth in drops of rain. That's why the first thing they ask for when they arrive is water, apart from the story of 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗏 with the vulture. So when the Orishas actually arrived on earth, they all started running because they didn't want to get rained on, or it was a new phenomenon for them. So Shango went running to the palm tree, Ochun to the river, Yemaya to the ocean, or at least nearby. But when 𝗃𝗏𝗏 arrived, he had nowhere to go. So he started walking and listening to Ifa, not running like the other Orishas. And he walked so calmly and oriented that he actually found a house. And when he found that house, he knocked on it. The people let him in. And they interrogated him. They said, who you are, why are you here, what are you doing? He said, my name is 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏, I'm an Orisha, I'm looking for my place in nature. And they said, well, what do you know how to do? He said, well, I know how to perform Ifa divination and perform 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗏 or make offerings to nature for people's favor. And they were like, all right, well, do it to us. And when he did, their lives started, scaling at an exponential rate to the point where they were like, please don't ever leave. Please stay in the home. You have nowhere else to go. So in the Odus of Eafung is why 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏's base position is in the home, where when you look at other Orishas like Ochung, it's the river, Chango, the palm tree, Oya, the marketplace. 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏's actual position is the home. So there's a couple points to take away from here. That's why the Iyawo should not run, right? The Iyawo should not run, should not be engaging in rambunctious behavior or nonsensical behavior. So that's the first thing. And then apart from that, the Iyawo should be home. And that's in the Odus of 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏, where to be able to reorganize oneself and have that stability, 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 walked right into the home and he's never left. So that's why when you feed Ifa, it should never ideally be outside of the house or not under a roof somehow. Ifa has to be covered. So there's that. Now, when you look at, all of the different aspects of the Iyaworaje, like when you come out, right? When you're fully dressed, a lot of people say, well, Baba, why do we have to be covered so much in the white cloth those first 3 months? Like we're literally, neck to toes in white. We have our head covered with multiple layers, etc. Why does our head have to be so covered? Now, without getting into too much detail, whatever occurred there is in a very delicate state. Like with all processes, when you're fresh out, it's fresh for a reason. That's why it's called that. So the various, things that we put on top to protect it are to help it assimilate. In the Odus of 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏, it speaks of why things such as hair or, external factors could negatively affect Ori in such a delicate state. So there's spiritualities that are actually trying through nature and through, process to basically extinguish or take away the effectiveness of the process we've been through. it's not that anyone could take away the Orisha process once it's done, but there are things that can occur based on our behavior during the Iyaworaje that can make it take longer for us to see the benefits. For example, once the surgery is done, it's done. No one can take that away from you. But if you don't listen to the advice and you don't wear a gauze or some type of protection, you can make things worse than before, whether you had the surgery done or not, to the point where it even has to be revisited. So when you look at Odus like 𝗃𝗶𝗹𝗁, which speak of the head covering, or 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗁𝗍, which speak of the spiritualities that are trying to disturb what has occurred up there, that's why we cover it the way we do. The Odu 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗁𝗍 speaks of the importance of the cotton and it being a protection against the 𝗃𝗏𝗈 Shoronga, who they're also trying to attack what's up there as well, because their whole job is to destroy us. And the best way to destroy us is by removing whatever is helping us at that moment. We spoke about, I believe in the last video, the shal, or the white cloth that goes over the person. In the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗀, it speaks once again of when the women specifically, would wear whites and things like that, but negativities would still be able to affect them negatively. So they ended up performing sacrifice with a white cloth. The white cloth actually became the shawl of Orisha, which is why the women, at least during their first 3 months, commonly wear an oversized white covering around their shoulders, which is almost the deflector of the negativity that could affect them. Now, men don't utilize this, but once again, that's why we cover all the way to our wrists, to be able to deflect and things like that. Now, the white cloth has deflective properties in the Odu of Eafung. The Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍 actually speaks of when the white cloth would actually expel the negativities or the twisted spirits from the person. If we look at 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍, Shango had to institute the white cloth at the door of the rooms of consecration to keep negativity out of them, because they would flow in and out of it, causing huge disturbances, right? So being that processes were done to our being, our body is our temple, of consecration. That's why we wear the white cloth on it, to be able to deflect any of the negativities from it. So that's why we try not to be too exposed. We don't want to expose our wrists or ankles, things like that, because those are all very hot points for negativity to install itself, especially at joints such as the ones I mentioned. That's all in 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍 as far as the white cloth. Another thing that is going to be super key during the Iyaworaje is making sure you're wearing your things. Now, mind you, the man, it's a little less eye-catching because ideally less would be exposed. Like, for example, in my routine, what I would wear was all my smaller 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍s, I would put them inside. And then the one I would have on the outside is the dress 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍, which is like the long priesthood one. In my case of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗁, that can be found in the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗁, which is, it's known as, in Ifa, it's known as the 𝗃𝗏𝗃, but in Orisha, it's known as the Iyaworaje, which basically makes reference to the long necklace of priesthood, or el collar de gala, or de almuerzo, that the person wears, which is the long one of their Orisha. So for the fellas, I would have that. And then, at least in our case, I would have my my bracelet of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗁, right, along with my 𝗃𝗏𝗃 and obviously my 𝗃𝗏𝗃. Now, when we look at our sisters, though, they have a much harder time. I mean, apart from all the layers of cloth that they have to wear, God bless them, they have to have all their collares outside, the big collar, they're wearing their 𝗃𝗏𝗃, they're wearing all of the bangles of the Orishas that they've received, usually the feminine ones, apart from their bracelet of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗁. They should have their 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗁 on, of course. Now, where do all of these come from, right? So when you look at the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍, it's actually where the bracelets of Oshun and Orisha manifested. And in that sign, it speaks of when there was a woman that was infertile, and she went for divination with Orumila, and the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍 was revealed, where Ifa said that she had to wear the bracelets of Orisha, specifically Oshun, to be able to become fertile and, achieve her dream of being a mother. When she initiated into Orisha and wore them, this came true. So from there forth, all of her children wear these bracelets. So it became a staple amongst the feminine Orishas, such as Oshun Yemaya and Oya, to wear their bangles or bracelets to maintain fertility, to maintain positivity, and ultimately deflect all of the negativity that could interrupt them from their goals. Because the reason the bracelets were necessary is because everyone would curse Oshun. She was beautiful and fertile and, you know, had the best chance of achieving her desires. No one else wanted that for her, so they'd do the witchcraft. But that's why she wore the bracelets, to cleanse herself and ultimately deflect it. So that's why our sisters have to wear this, you know, amount of, I mean, 5 plus 7, forgive my math, is 12. 12 plus 9, oh God, Joseph, don't, what is that, 21? Hopefully. So it's like 21 bracelets, 22 with 𝗶𝗸𝗲, not including the beaded ones, etc. I mean, that's a lot. But all of this is to deflect the negativity of the Yahw, or away from the Yahw, because you are a sponge at that point. Everything's trying to attack you. Everything's trying to attach to you. There's a lot of spiritual parasites and contagion in the air. I mean, walking around the wrong corner could cause a negativity to get picked up. It's like when Ashe said, I don't want to see you on the corner. That was why, because there's negativities and spiritualities. I mean, you don't know what happened at that corner. God forbid somebody got hurt there, or there was a transaction that happened there that was illicit, any of these things, but that all leaves energy, and the Yahw could pick up everything. The same way a baby can pick up everything. That's why we swaddle the baby. You know, it's the exact same concept. So that's why you wear the metallic bracelets there. Your ide always has to be on. That's in the Odus of Eafung as well, and 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗲, where the bracelet of Orisha, the ide, specifically the priesthood one, which is known as the maso, was to help protect them on a much larger level, on a stronger level, where, you know, through the processes that priests go through within Ifa Orisha, they provide a much grander scale of protection rather than, you know, just the hand of Ifa. Even though hand of Ifa is lovely, you know, priesthood rights just provide another element, an angle of protection and fortitude. So when certain spiritualities see the thick bracelet, it's actually resonating with the person's spirituality. That's 90% of the battle right there. It'll deflect it, you know. So there's that. Some people say, well, Baba, you know, why can't the Yahw go out or be out in public in excess, you know, etc.? So in the Odus of Eafung or Eafung, it speaks of why, you know, the religious practitioner in general should not be out idly in public places. Like, you can't just be hanging out at a park or hanging out at the corner or in front of the bodega. You have to be going somewhere, because to be in an idle position like that could bring negativity, because in Eafung, they would do it and negativity would come, the police would come. Like, whenever you see people hanging out, it just gives this initial reaction of, what are they up to? You know, and Ifa and Orisha didn't want any part of that. So that's why in Eafung, you can find the rule as to why the Yahw, who is the shining example of who we are as a culture, should not be hanging out idly in parks or corners or anything like that, right? So, but when you look at the day of the Yahw, I mean, it's pretty easy to make a mistake in general all the time. I mean, there's so many rules that you have to follow. You know, the cleansing aspect of it. A lot of people say, you know, why can I not use perfumated things and articles? Because in the Odus of Eafung, it says that modern perfumes have chemicals and things in them that are not natural. So, you know, when it comes to scent and things like that, we want to keep it hypoallergenic, because it could actually disturb the energies and spiritualities that we've assimilated into our body, making them weaker or more difficult to interact with. But when you look at the Odus of Eafung, it says that nature's cologne was aromatic herbs, whether it be basil, whether it be spearmint, sage, any of these things. This is the closest thing to perfume we're actually going to be able to utilize. So under the guidance of your elders, a spiritual bath like that from time to time during your Iyaworaje has no risk whatsoever and could provide a lot of benefit as well if that's something you want to incorporate more of. But it's those two Odus why the Yahw can't use perfume or artificial things, because it could disturb the purity and spirituality of the Orisha they've just assimilated, right? What else can't the Yahw do? So can't go out to restaurants, right? We can't be sitting at tables and things like that. A lot of people say, well, Baba, how come the first 3 months I have to sit on the floor? Well, remember that this is a spirituality of communion, right? You're trying to build a relationship with all of the energies and deities that you've just brought home, right? So when we look at the Orishas, and this is something you could see just walking through somebody's house, after, completing the Orisha process and setting them up, they're on the floor as well, right? They've just been born. The significance of being on the floor is actually to radiate 𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗃, or earth, where that energy is vibrating them and helping them assimilate being born. The same way a child has to be in his mother's arms, the Orishas have to be in contact with 𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗃, or Mother Earth, because that's where they sprang from. So being that the Orishas live on a mat, on the floor, so do we. When we look at the significance of the mat and why the Yahw utilizes it all their own, that, can be found in the Odus of Eafung as well as 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏. In that Odu, the 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, or the mat, performed 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏 and 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 to be superior to earth. That's why it lays on top of earth and not the other way around. And when you look at Iyawo Rules, it's where it became sacred. Sacred as far as cleanliness, because it's our bed, it's our workspace, it's our everything. So that's why the Yahw utilizes it consistently. Like, I've seen some people, somebody even did it to me, unfortunately, when I was going through my Iyaworaje. I remember, I was at a function at my godmother's house, and I went to open my mat and throw myself to an elder Santera, and she got a little perturbed by it. She's like, oh, this young generation, now they use the 𝗃𝗃𝗏 to throw themselves. But that's actually an Odu, why the Yahw really shouldn't be throwing themselves directly on the floor, because, I don't know what's occurred in that space. And Iyawo Rules says, ultimately, the mat should be on top of the floor. And then 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 was where the king did 𝗃𝗏𝗏 to be on top of the mat. So if we're kings and queens and, we've just initiated, you don't have the obligation to throw yourself on the floor and get dirty. Needless to say, that woman was never invited by my godmother ever again. She was able to think about why we didn't invite her the next time from the comfortability of her own home. God bless. But that was between elders. But neither here nor there, I always had my mat on me because it's what Ifa stipulates. But that's why everything you're doing is pretty much on the mat from a standpoint of eating and commiserating and things like that. Baba, why as a Yahw do I have to utilize one spoon and one plate and one cup and all these different things? Well, when you look at the Odus of Eafung, as well as 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏, and that Odu was where any and everybody would serve Orunmila, and he would eat from any utensil, plate, etc. And they tried to poison him a couple times. They tried to hurt him a couple times. And he said, I need one set of utensils so that I can be sure that no one's trying to harm me. And I only want my wife or my 𝗃𝗶𝗏𝗏 serving me. So when we look at Iyawo Rules, because unfortunately it's the Odu where the spiritual people tried to do witchcraft to each other through poisoning each other's food, as well as 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗏, that Odu says that the Yahw has to have their own set of utensils and plates to ensure their safety, because them receiving any spiritual whiplash through warfare or any type of witchcraft or negativity could be very detrimental to them in this very delicate state. So because of that, they should have their own set of things to be able to ensure that, and should only be served by their elders or, close family members, such as their spouse, mother, etc. But they shouldn't really be allowing anybody to do that other than those said few to protect themselves. Another question that I've received quite a bit is, hey, Baba, why am I not allowed to take anything from somebody's hand or shake their hand? So in the Odus of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏 or 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏, it speaks of the identification of the palm chakra. If I'm saying that incorrectly, forgive me. And it's actually a portal to the body. It's one of the places where energy enters and exits. So Iyawos and religious people started realizing that they would shake people's hands and they would feel weak afterwards, or feel as if they had suffered a blow or a strike, and or a loss, and they visited Orumila. Otura Ogunda was revealed, where Ifa said they couldn't come in contact in that delicate state with others because they could pick up more than necessary from a mediumship standpoint or even energetically. So that's why the Iyawo, you'll notice they don't accept things from people's hands. We really shouldn't be shaking people's hands. Even things, like even the Hispanic hello, the cheek kiss and things like that. It's just points of contact where more energy could be absorbed by the new initiate that could be detrimental to them. And some people are going to get offended by it. When I was going through my Iyaworaje, now mind you, I'm a gentleman. I believe you shake somebody's hand, you look them in the eyes, all these protocols of interaction. And for me not to be able to do that, it was pretty difficult because, you get some looks and things like that. And no matter how much you try to educate somebody or let them know, hey, I'm not trying to be rude, this is my spirituality, some people are just intolerant. So you really can't pay too much attention to people. Just say, hey, could you please put that on the counter? And keep it moving, so that you're not exchanging that information or energy like 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗏 tells us not to, right? So going back to the routine, all the things I would wear, the Yahw should not be barefoot, right? Once again, that's another chakra through which energy could come in and out, especially on the bare ground. When you look at Odus like 𝗃𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗃 and 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗃𝗃, it says, once again, there's a chakra down there. There's an entry point, and not all ground is hallowed. So in this Odu, it says the Yahw should not walk around barefoot, even in their home. They need to have their slippers on, ideally some socks and things like that. It's just another way to protect, because more energy being absorbed that we have to filter through, it might take longer to dispel it than to avoid it altogether. So any of the entry points of the body, from the feet, hands, etc., need to be protected. Especially the head. The head is the most sacred space. The only people that are allowed to touch the person's head, other than their spouse or possibly young children, are doctors and hairstylists, right? The doctor's hands are blessed in the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏 or Eafung Meji, and the barber's hands are blessed in the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏 and 𝗃𝗏𝗹𝗁𝗋. But you want to be very, very, very selective who performs the services for you, because, regardless if their hands are blessed or not, if they have negative intentions for you, it still might hit. So, be very aware of who's, cutting your hair after those first 3 months, depending on your lineage, so that you can avoid uncomfortable situations. Baba, it gets really hot in my apartment. Why am I not allowed to sleep as nature intended, right? No one knows what you're doing in your bedroom. God bless. No one's really interested. No one needs to find out anything. But once again, it's just another example of, protecting ourselves. 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃 Meji says why the sheets of the Yahw should be white, and as many accessories that they utilize as well should be white within reason. But then again, if you look at the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃 Meji, it's why the white cloth was manifested to protect the person while they slept. And the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃 Meji was where Orumila would receive spiritual visitation at night, and it was driving him insane. So divination, 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏, Eshu, basically helped nab the spirituality or spirit that was causing, the tantrums and issues. And they were able to basically dispel him via the white cloth. So that's why the Yahw's room, ideally, as much white as possible. It doesn't have to be white furniture. That may be a little extreme. But, pajamas and things like that are ideal because, it's just another vulnerable state that you are in, After you're in white, you and your partner, you sleep however you choose, God bless. But ideally, we want to be sleeping in clothes. Doesn't have to be as much clothes as when we leave the house. Our house should be, for the most part, a spiritually sterile environment. But you want to wear at least your whites while you're sleeping somehow. You don't have to wear your necklaces. You don't have to wear your bangles. If you want to wear your Ide Borula, that's fine. You never have to take that off in your life. Whatever's comfortable for you. But make sure at least those things are in place to be able to protect the integrity of the ceremony you went through, and most importantly, your well-being, right? So as you're going through, you wake up, you do your processes, you go through your routines. Cleanliness is close to godliness. The Yahw has to be despojando as much as possible. Rubbing certain things on yourself like shea butter or a very light amount of 𝗃𝗃𝗃 is great, being that these are all ingredients of 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗃, who helps maintain spiritual stability. They have some benefits when it comes to cleansing and tranquility, which is really what the Yahw needs. I mean, every morning you should be ringing your bells, saluting your Orishas. That's the first thing that needs to be done. Now, I have heard of some houses being very extreme when it comes to certain deprivations that they provide. Me personally, I don't think anybody should be deprived of the opportunity to brush their teeth or to take a bath or, hygiene, as far as, using a razor for certain things. There's limits and boundaries, just humbly in my opinion. But to each their own, and a big thing here, guys, is if you're going through that year in white, these are the conversations you want to have beforehand to make sure that that's the house for you. Because, for example, if I go to somebody's spiritual home and they said, yeah, we don't let the Yahw use deodorant, I mean, who am I to say any of the contrary? That's your godchild, and, I'm incapable of being, disrespectful or overstepping boundaries. That is extreme, but at the same time, that person chose you as their elder. And if they were aware of that, I mean, to each his own, But Ifa says in the Odus of 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃 that Ifa no anda con la peste. So Ifa does not associate with anything smelly. So Ifa says cleanliness is close to godliness, just like in the Odus of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗍, Olorisha would bathe frequently and use aromatic herbs as cologne. The cleaner we are, the more accessible we make ourselves based on our hygiene, the closer that spirituality of Orisha is going to be to us and allow us to progress. As far as the study of Ifa and Orisha during the year, I implore it. The Odus Baba Eyobe says that first year of Ifa Orisha, that Orisha that you crowned is as close to you as he's ever going to be. Is after that first year, it's really on you as far as maintaining that spirituality alive within you through motivated study and practice. But there are no restrictions there. There are houses that don't give the book and things like that immediately. In ours, we do, because we want that person to take advantage and start learning as soon as they can, especially with all the investment they've made to now have this new position and license, right? So that's extremely key as well. But for example, I mean, restrictions as far as working out, not a huge fan of them. The person should be allowed to work out. Definitely wearing their whites, trying not to overstimulate other people in the gym, or making sure you're wiping things down. I'm really touching on things that are a little more modern, questions that come up that are much more, based on things that, happen more commonly now, because people want to ask, hey, can I use the gym? Hey, can I start a new relationship? And these are all very important questions because life does not stop for the Iyaworaje, whether you have to work, whether you have to travel. I think that's another great one as well. A lot of people haven't understood that the Iyawo should not be frequenting planes or cruises or any of those things. Obviously, wearing, any type of, swimwear whatsoever and being exposed at the beach is completely taboo. That goes against, 100 rules. That's a big red alert. But, as far as traveling, ideally the Yahw should not be traveling that much. I mean, in the Odus of Eafung was where Olorisha got initiated and he started traveling, and he wasted a bunch of time and energy to end right back in Ife where he started. When you look at something like the airplane, if you notice in 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃, Olorisha said, or 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗃 better said, I don't want you anywhere near the mountain. Now imagine if the Yahw would have went up the mountain, I mean, that's kind of the height that a plane is at, if not higher. So heights and things like that, ideally the Yahw shouldn't stimulate climbing because accidents tend to happen this year. And the Odus of 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃 also states it, that, someone who hasn't fully developed their wings shouldn't try to fly. So being that the Yahw is seen as a new initiate, it's definitely not the time. I mean, you know, for any of my children, I mean, me personally, I never took them, you know, on a plane or, you know, before usually a year, which ironically the Iyaworaje is a year. And in cruises as well, you know, it's like Olokun and Yemaya said, we don't want you in the ocean. So, you know, when you're at a ship at sea in the middle of the Atlantic or the Caribbean, you know, you're basically in open water, and even though you're in a ship, you're still over it. So definitely not something we want to do either, based on what 𝗃𝗏𝗃 says. You know, driving, we have to drive. When you look at the concept of the mirror, though, it becomes a little bit tricky. And some people are saying, no, you can't look in a mirror. Well, how do I look behind me? How do I safely get from one lane to the next? There's no way to avoid mirrors. Now, there is a difference between making eye contact with yourself and looking to, or versus looking at yourself in a mirror to be, you know, aesthetic or vain, to see, hey, do I look good? Do I look all right? That's a no-no. And the reason being is because in the Odus of Eafung is where vanity actually became a taboo, amongst others. But in that Odu is where Orunmila and Orisha had their child throw away all of their makeup and cosmetics to go through the Iyaworaje, because apart from the hazing aspect of it, they wanted the Yahw to learn to love themselves for who they were, because they were beautiful. But they were losing sight of that because they were trying to impress so many other people rather than, you know, be at ease or, you know, with themselves. So that's why cosmetics, you know, certain aspects of, you know, beauty and care are really taboo at that point. But, you know, it speaks of that in the Odus of Eafung, which is why, you know, certain things, you know, we have to be very natural during that year. And the reason is because we're trying not to do anything that can disturb the Orisha, once again, that we've just placed within ourselves or around ourselves. But driving, you know, there's no way around it, but you could look at yourself in the eyes to be able to look around. But as far as, you know, looking at yourself for, you know, aesthetics, not so much, you know. But driving, you have to transport yourself. Be very careful, be very judicious, because things tend to happen during the Iyaworaje. No form of self-affliction whatsoever. We can't hurt ourselves. We can't be too judgmental of ourselves or, you know, detrimental to ourselves, and by no means physically. If anybody's going through that, they need to, you know, contact their godparent, contact a professional that could help them through that time, because the same way postpartum is a real thing, the depression that can come with the Iyaworaje is a very real thing. It could be very drastic, very lonely, lots of solitude. You know, the Yahw, another big thing is intoxicants, right? When we look at the Odus of 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗃, it speaks of why the Yahw should not overindulge alcohol, because it has a way of affecting Ori. It transforms us. This is also in the Odus of 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗃, where it speaks of the 3 stages of drinking, the third being the worst, you know, and why the Yahw really shouldn't be drinking alcohol if they don't need to, which I can't imagine why they would want to, or need to, better said. And habits such as smoking, you know, when you look at the Odus of 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗍, where the smoke actually scared Olodumare away, that's actually the spirituality we're trying to maintain with us during our Iyaworaje. So if we're smoking and we're kind of engulfed in it, you know, all of that energy that we're trying to preserve that first year to maximize our results, we're actually getting rid of it, you know. So that's another pretty big taboo as well. Like, I would wake up, I would have breakfast with my grandmother. You know, usually we'd have a day, and we'd go out and things like that. I'd drive her around. You got to avoid arguments. You can't flick nobody off in traffic. The Odus of Eafung says we shouldn't be raising our voice or speaking in profanity anyway. And those are actions that could actually scare the Orisha away from us. So, you know, you're going to have a couple people, you know, you might have someone scream hallelujah in your face. You might have somebody call you a zombie. You know, you can have any of those things. You got to avoid conflict at all costs, especially physical conflict. You know, the blessing is lost there. I mean, we're not really allowed to lift our hands to people, because we could really be detrimental, because regardless of how physically imposing you are or not, within Ifa Orisha, whenever we hit somebody, we're not just hitting them. Our Orisha is hitting them. Any of these things. I mean, in the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗀𝗃, as well as Iyaworaje, it speaks of why the Orisha practitioner or the Yahw cannot get into physical confrontations with anybody because the effects were too detrimental and it caused separation. So, and this is an interesting point as well because there's a lot of celebrities, especially within the reggaeton, cubaton world, you know, that are either musical artists. I mean, you have some that are boxers. I mean, when you look at all the aspects of Caribbean culture, you could find a practitioner in any industry, right? But I would go as far to say, you know, if somebody just initiated an Orisha and they're a boxer, I don't know, man. I don't know. That's really difficult. Or if they're a UFC fighter and whatnot, I don't know. It's not good. I mean, regardless if it's somebody's profession or not, they have to really take that into account because, I mean, we really can't be taking hits to the head or hitting people in the head when we're going through our year. The same thing, like if they're a rapper or any of those things, if you're going through your year in white, just make sure nobody knows about it. But, I mean, it could be very detrimental. And the reason we don't take photos during the Iyaworaje is in the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗀𝗃 or 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗃, where every time we take a photo, we capture a piece of that person's soul. So Ifa doesn't like that, and Orisha doesn't like that. You know, the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗍𝗏 was where Odu and 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗏 were completely adverse to surveillance equipment or anything that could capture space and time. So definitely big taboos and definitely not a process for anybody who's living that lifestyle unless they're willing to take a sabbatical. I tell you, I was really, you know, blessed. During my year in white, I was a very young man. I really didn't have any habits or things like that that were against, you know, the process. Now, being older and, you know, having experimented life a little bit more, it would be quite a big sacrifice to be able to crown Orisha once more because there's a lot of things I would have to abstain from. But, you know, on a daily basis as human beings, there's plenty of things that we shouldn't indulge in based on each of our own personal situations. You have some people who can't enjoy a slice of cake. You have some people who, you know, can't enjoy, you know, being out in the sun for too long, or somebody who can't overexert themselves, or whatever it may be. No matter what you do or whatever stage of life you are at, there's going to be something you're going to have to give up, unfortunately, for whatever extended amount of time it may be. The most important thing is recognizing within yourself that you have the fortitude and discipline to be able to accomplish whatever it is that you want. So, you know, for everybody out there that's heard this video and is like, wow, I could never do that, I'm happy you heard the video because more than likely you couldn't. But for anybody that looks at it and says, man, I really want to do that, but that seems hard, this is the spirituality for you, because Olorisha is not going to make you more disciplined. Olorisha is not going to make you more powerful or have more strength or fortitude, but he will give you one of the biggest opportunities in your life to make it happen for yourself. So for anybody interested in Orisha and going through this process, and mind you, we touched on a bunch more stuff in this video that wasn't the last one, but there's even more stuff we can go through. I'm not sure if we're going to make a part 3, but there's a lot of different things. But if you are interested in any of these things and you see the benefit it could provide you and satisfaction, regardless of how hard it seems, then it's meant for you. So that was the whole point of these videos, is to give you enough foresight to know what to expect so you can mentally prepare for what may be the hardest year of your life. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed part 2 for sure. BotánicaCandlesandMore.com is up and running for all your service and products needs. We ship. Shout out to all the members, VIPs, super fans, supporters. You're the best part of the channel. We appreciate you. Guys, be on the lookout for the announcement about the gala workshop here in Orlando, Florida, so we can learn Ifa and Orisha together hands-on, where you'll have personal access to me as well as the other professionals within our organization that have a following themselves. If you haven't had the chance to watch us lately, be sure to catch us on any of the other platforms for our audio, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio. Be sure to check out the classes. The Mayuba class is up. The 4-week curriculum is up. We have a new matriculation, so definitely see what the next dates are for you to be able to get in there. Big thank you from all of us. Be sure to subscribe. And until next time, guys, see the light.
Baba Joseph showed the path today. Baba knows the way, we follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients, he honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.